Rama Rama Hare Hare. 5 more verses from Light of the Bhagavata, chapters 11 through 15. This is going to be much shorter than yesterday's class at this time, but that means more time for discussion. Prabhupada is going to start getting into more social comments, social meaning varnashram structure, and understanding how society can be organized nicely to make life conducive for spiritual elevation. And doing that in conjunction with lessons from nature takes a lot of creativity, but Prabhupada's masterful. So chapter 11, he's given the title, Taking Shelter of the Lord's Representative. And here's his writing. In the rainy season, when rivers swell and rush to the ocean, and as the wind blows the waves about, the ocean appears to be agitated. Similarly, if a person engaged in the mystic yoga process is not very advanced in spiritual life, he can be affected by the modes of nature and thus will be agitated by the sex impulse. From the rainy season and the waves in the river, waves in the ocean, to a yogi, agitated yogi. A person fixed in spiritual knowledge will not be attracted by the allurement of material nature in the form of beautiful women. Now, I've used images straight from the internet. This is not one of the ladies' artwork, the previous one showing the waves of the ocean. But a major part of the intention of all of this exercise is to, besides to the Western audience and showing how Prabhupada, the consistency of Prabhupada's message to the world from way back when it was just, he hadn't even ventured out of India, but he was looking towards the Far East. The message is framed for the people, but the content is essentially the same. And how consistent was Prabhupada for so many years with the message, not wavering with the message, but different audiences, nuanced in different ways, but very powerful, consistent message. So there's Chinese characteristics in all of it, just like this next one. However, one who is not yet mature in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge may be attracted at any moment by the illusion of temporary happiness. So there's the Chinese character for happiness, in case you want to know what it looks like. Are you taking a foreign language in school? No. I met somebody somewhere, and I asked them what foreign language they're studying, and they said Chinese. Because when I was in school, it was Spanish, French, or German, because that was useful. Being a lot of our language, the root words are derived from or very similar to Latin-based words that have their play in German, Spanish, and French. But now it's Chinese for obvious practical reasons. So there's what happiness looks like in Chinese. So the message in this particular verse is staying fixed on the spiritual purpose, and when one is not mature in transcendental knowledge, it's very easy to become deviated by the allure of temporary happiness. Temporary happiness is not substantial. It's not enduring. It's now you see it, now you don't. It's not what real happiness is. But the lure is there for one who's not mature in spiritual knowledge. One of the illusions of temporary happiness is longevity. But how long will that last? Now the image is a Chinese image of, we have, in our West, we have a different image of old man time. This is their image for old man time. Being attended to by a nice lady who is providing anything he wants for the old man. By the movements of time, the illusory temporary happiness will suddenly become distress. That is, this world is a place of duality. When it's like this, wait a while. And then it's like that. Honor, the same as Bhagavad Gita's message. Honor, dishonor, winter and summer season, pleasure, pain, this and that. It's a place of duality, so whenever it's this for a while, wait a while, it's going to be that. When it's that for a while, wait a while, it's going to be this. And it just keeps moving, vacillating, because that's the nature of the place. It's a place of duality. Nothing is stable, nothing is permanent, nothing is real. Real in the sense of sat, that which it endures, that which exists eternally. So when in this world of duality, the distress portion is varied, but it's sure to be part of our experience. So here's distress or suffering, different types: anxiety, tribulation, pain, confusion, hardship. And sometimes one of these or more than one of these are pressing, and the happiness went away and it's something else. It's just part of duality. So how does this apply to the metaphor of nature? Disturbance can be compared to the ocean, agitated by the rushing rivers and blowing wind during the rainy season. So now supposing there's somebody like this audience that he was speaking to in Japan, they have some learning, they have some will to see peace and tranquility and elevation of human society, but duality is still operating in their lives. As the ocean can become agitated during rainy season, a person engaged in the mystic yoga process who is not very advanced in spiritual life may fall prey to the senses, ushering in distress. So here's a nice image of a Chinese fellow, and here's a nice image of an Indian fellow looking at his iPad, a little surprised at what he's seeing on the iPad. Ooh. Or Haridas Thakur, by fixing oneself at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, then one will not be carried away by sex agitation. We know these two events that took place in Haridas Thakur's life, where Ram Chandra Khan tried to allure him by the most celebrated prostitute in the town, and instead of he falling prey to the agitation of her expertise, she became a Vaishnav and gave up her impure profession and became a great devotee. The second example is it's mentioned when he went to Pulia, Maya Devi herself came to allure Haridas Thakur, and he was so fixed in his chanting of the holy name that he was unmoved. Maybe some of you read I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu story by Giriraj Maharaj. Has anyone here read that book? You read the book? Two of you read the book. Huh? I was reading it, so you heard my reading it. So twice in this book, Giriraj Maharaj mentions Mr. Nair, who was the fellow who wanted to stop the devotees from building the temple at that land and so forth and so on. Lots and lots and lots of intrigue, including sending gundas and trying to tear down the building. And when they had the deities, it's a very interesting story. One of the attempts to disgrace Prabhupada was by disgracing Giriraj Maharaj. There was a plan for Mr. Nair to meet with Giriraj Maharaj, and he was sent with I forget who, somebody who was like a go-between between Mr. Nair and ISKCON, and Giriraj Maharaj was invited to a meeting. That's my memory of the exact context of the meeting is not so clear, but the part that's clear is Giriraj Maharaj was put in the back of an ambassador, which is a kind of a small car, and somehow he was in the middle, and seated right next to him was a lady dressed very nicely, and he found out later she was a professional prostitute, and while sitting in the back seat of the car, she started making her moves, putting her hand on his leg and rubbing his leg and trying to agitate him. Now, it doesn't say how that stopped, but it was stopped because although sex agitation is a natural response for any embodied soul, he didn't yield to that because he didn't want to be a bad representative of Prabhupada. That Prabhupada devotion protected him. He mentions it again later at the end of the book. Apparently it was like a really big deal to be the sense that he felt protected. He doesn't elaborate more about this lady and what transpired and how he stopped her from doing what she was doing. There's no details, but it's an example of protection is there when there's shelter, just like going back here. By fixing oneself at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, Prabhupada's words in this book, Light of the Bhagavata, then one will not be carried away. Doesn't mean that there won't be some disturbance, like rivers rushing into the ocean, there's some disturbance, and the wind that blows on the water in the ocean, there's some disturbance. But being carried away by that, metaphorically, is protected by being at the shelter of the lotus feet of one spiritual master. In this way, protection. Here's the Haridas Thakur example, the prostitute. Instead of his falling to her advances, she confessed everything, what Ramchandra Khan had sent her to do, her purpose in coming to him, and her profuse apology for this behavior. Haridas Thakur's response, you probably all know the story. But he said to her, the first evening that you came, it was very clear what your purpose was. Anyway, I stayed because I wanted to deliver you. So now that you have come to this purification, I request you go back home. All the ornaments and wealth and jewelry and affluence that you've acquired from your profession, give it all away. Come back with a simple cloth, one cloth, with your head shaved, and I'll give you instructions. So she did, and he gave her the cottage. You see in the background is the Tulsi plant. Sit by the Tulsi plant and just chant Hare Krishna, and Krishna will maintain you. And he got up and left. So he was protected, and by the strength of the shelter that he had in the holy name, she was also transformed and similarly protected from a bad life. So that's chapter 11. The allure of temporary happiness, thus covering the sense of what real happiness is, and spiritual well-being. Similar, a little different, devotees remain undisturbed even at times of great misfortune. Now this is a big lesson, because there's always not only duality, but sometimes it's like big duality. It's like a big misfortune, great misfortune, mahadukkha. Mahadukkha, great distress. The mountains, although being struck by torrents of rain during the rainy season, are not shaken, just as those whose hearts are dedicated to the transcendental personality of Godhead are never disturbed, even when harassed by great misfortune. So in the sky we see heavy rain clouds, rain coming down, strong wind. There's a fellow riding his animal, and he's enduring because he has some place of shelter. A person who is spiritually advanced accepts any adverse condition of life as the mercy of the Lord. Now what it looks like is in this painting, there's a fellow walking on water. A yogi, I guess, walking on water. And there are persons pointing, look at, he's walking on water. So if that's what it's meaning, that adverse conditions can be transcended. And transcending of adverse conditions is the grace that goes to those who have taken shelter of the personality of Godhead. Now, it doesn't mean if you become a nice devotee, you can walk on water. But it means you can be undisturbed even when there's cause of disturbance. It's a standard teaching. One of the profound ones that I remember from way back when is when Prabhupada was visiting in Los Angeles, he spent a lot of time in Los Angeles because he found the weather very suited for his translation work, and the seasons were not so extreme, not too hot and not too cold in the winter. So he spent substantial time there. And while there in Los Angeles, he would give classes by having different devotees read right from his books. They read a verse, the Sanskrit, then the translation, and then a sentence or two, and Prabhupada would interrupt and explain it, and then have them continue, and they would continue. And in this way, they'd go through a whole chapter, chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, from beginning to end. Those of you that have one of those playback devices, you can listen to a whole chapter in Los Angeles like that. I remember very clearly in chapter 6, Prabhupada explaining the word dhira, D-H-I-R-A, dhira. Dhira, Prabhupada explained, means to remain undisturbed. very clearly, I've heard it in other places since then, to remain undisturbed when there's no cause for disturbance is not such a wonderful thing. But when there's cause for disturbance and one remains undisturbed, that's a very wonderful thing. And that's the meaning of dhira. So how can one be undisturbed when there's disturbance? And the answer is when their consciousness, the mind and consciousness is absorbed in something. There's a nice story. I mentioned something about Akbar. You were commenting about Akbar, right? Was it you that was commenting? Someone was commenting about Akbar when I made that reference. So one of the features of Akbar's life is he had a court jester named Birbal. You know any Birbal stories? I know a Birbal story. It's related directly to this. In Vrindavan area, in Delhi and Agra and Vrindavan in between area, in the winters it can be very cold. So one morning, Akbar and Birbal were walking together early in the morning, and he saw a lake, and he touched the water of the lake and said, "It's so cold. No one can remain in this water." And Birbal said, "Oh yes, they can." He said, "I challenge you, you demonstrate it." So Birbal found a very poor man and gave him, said, the king will give you some big reward, so many gold coins, if you can remain immersed in this water all night long. Could you accept the challenge? He found one man who would accept the challenge. And sure enough, the man stayed in the water because there was money, some gold coins waiting. So the king was in disbelief. How could you do this? So he asked the man, "Here's the gold coins, but I want to know, how are you able to endure?" And the man said, "Apart from the lake, there was a lamp, and I just fixed my gaze on the lamp all night long. And because I fixed my gaze on the lamp all night long, I was able to endure the cold." And the king said, "Birbal, this man cheated. He got energy, he got heat from the lamp that was some distance from the lake, so I'm not going to give him the gold." The next day, Birbal didn't come to court, as he would do every day on time. And he didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. So the king sent a messenger, "Where is Birbal?" And Birbal sent back a message, "I was cooking and it was taking a long time. So I wasn't able to come because my cooking wasn't completed." So the king came to Birbal's place and said, "I see you're cooking, but the pot is 6 feet above where the flame is." And I said, so Birbal said, "So similarly, this man may have been getting some heat from the lamp that was some distance away from the lake. But how much heat can come from that lamp that was some distance from the lake, any more than how much heat can come from cooking my khichdi with a pot that's 6 feet above the flame?" And Akbar was very wise and he understood, so he said, "Okay, I'll give the gold coins to this man." In other words, he wasn't cheating. His mind was fixed on something. And what to speak of that something is not just a lamp some distance from a lake, but is transcendent, the source of everything. If one can achieve that and accomplish that, then even when there's disturbance, one can remain undisturbed. It's an essential message of yoga, of any type. And what to speak of that which is actually the source of everything, all power, all strength, all beauty, all wealth, all renunciation, everything. By fixing one's consciousness in transcendence, one can endure easily. One can come to the stage of being dhira, or undisturbed, even when there's a great upheaval. It's right in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. Such a tolerant devotee is completely eligible to enter the spiritual kingdom. Such devotees are compared to high mountains, which are never agitated in any way, even when struck by powerful torrents of rain in the rainy season. Again, the theme of lessons of life from scenes within nature. Here's a young fellow standing on a mountaintop looking off in the distance, and there's the rain clouds in the sky. I just thought it's a nice image connected with all of this. Here's Haridas Thakur again. Spiritually advanced devotees are never disturbed, even when harassed by great misfortune. Rather, they accept any adverse condition as the mercy of the Lord. Who knows the Bhagavatam verse that teaches this from Brahma's prayers? Canto 10, chapter 14. Okay. You know the whole verse? Ekam vipakam. Something, something. Mukti pade sadayabak. One is eligible for liberation. That person who can tolerate the temporary and take it as good fortune. Here comes some reduced fortune coming to me compared to what I deserve from my past misdeeds by the grace of the Supreme Lord, by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. One can endure any great misfortune. And when the misfortune comes, it's the mercy of the Lord. So this is Haridas Thakur chanting while he's being beaten and dragged in the marketplace. The next painting is Rupa Goswami hearing from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Prayag. Such devotees are free from pride and envy, and they easily gain the mercy of the Lord. So this internal condition of shelter taking, the external condition of being quite tolerant of duality, sometimes on the opulence and affluence side, sometimes on the hardship and misfortune side, and not being swayed by either, and not being swayed because of being fixed in one thing. The opportunity being given to somebody, any one of us, to serve Krishna and his loving devotees. Now, it's nice sounding, but it's more than nice sounding. It's something that gives one strength. Or say it negatively. If that's not there, that high-sounding message is going to go out the window when there's some tribulation or hardship or something. One is not going to be able to endure it peacefully, courageously, and so forth. Lessons from nature. Chapter 13. I told you this is going to be a shorter session. Forgetting our eternal servitorship of the Lord, or to the Lord. In the rainy season, some of the roads are not frequently used and become covered with long grasses, and thus it becomes very difficult to see the road. Similarly, In this age, the transcendental scriptures are not properly studied by the Brahmanas. Being covered by the effects of time, the scriptures are practically lost, and it becomes very difficult to understand or follow them. Interesting. Comparing some practical experience of life. I was asked for the Sunday Feast lecture, there's a theme, ancient wisdom, modern relevance. So I said, I want to speak upon light of the Bhagavata and connect it to the ancient wisdom, modern relevance. So things may change externally, things do change, definitely things do change externally, but principles don't change. And principles of higher consciousness are one of those things that don't change, does not change. Due to neglect, now here the example is on the rainy season, paths may not be used much. And so paths that are not used much, they become overgrown with grasses in the rainy season. One can hardly even distinguish where the path is. So there, similarly, in the age of Kali, persons that should be, would be, could be brahmanas of society, what are they doing? Studying engineering and technology and business. Isn't it? Go to any university, the would-be, could be, should be brahmanas from whatever the country is, they're engaged in highly advanced forms of technology. And by that, there's big education needed and big occupation and salary and lifestyle. They're richly or handsomely rewarded for using their intellectual capacity in that way instead of the way that high intellects are meant to be used by God's gift. So it doesn't mean those things shouldn't be done, but if those things are taken up, it shouldn't be in the neglect of proper understanding of Scripture. Then comes the how do I balance between this and that, the material and spiritual. That classic question. The answer to that one is just make sure the big rock goes in first. You know that example? Okay, I'm going to give you a quiz. You ready for a quiz? Okay. Picture over here, there's a table. And on the table, there's a glass jar. And along with the glass jar, there's a big rock. There's some smaller rocks. There's some pebbles and there's some sand. 4 things. Big rock, smaller rocks, pebbles, and sand. And they're all going to fit in the glass jar. Now, question, what goes in first? The big rock. Why? If you put in the other stuff first, then the big rock isn't going to fit. But if you put the big rock in first, and all the other stuff fits, they can be jiggled around by the side. The last thing that goes in is the sand. It can just in between little spaces, and it all fits. So then comes the question, how to identify the big rock? And for spiritual well-being, the big rock is our devotional practices. Supposing somebody gets so involved in doing homework or so involved with your job and occupation, there isn't time. There isn't time. One person I spoke to while in India, they work 14 hours a day. 6 days of the week, and sometimes on Sunday. So what does that mean? They're at the end of 14 hours, their brain is mush, and the body's exhausted. And then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day. They're getting beat up by the material energy. And they can say, I don't have time. But that's a choice to work 14 hours anyway, it's not putting the big rock in first. And that's that's life in a big city in India. But not only in India. Some people in the West, they work like that too. Now, some people won't do like that, but some people do like that. So, as the image on the screen is showing, this metaphor of rainy season is used to compare to a time when well-worn paths, because of the wet flooding water, paths may not be used much, and so the path gets covered, becomes grassy, you may not even be able to see where the path is. Human society is meant to be guided by brahmanas, and brahmanas are meant to dedicate themselves to very clear, under proper guidance, study of the scriptures. But if they're not doing that, then the whole society is also misguided. Heavy rain during the rainy season results in roads becoming less used. This is the same message, with abundant overgrowth of grasses concealing the path. Similarly, neglecting spiritual practices can be compared to, quote, being deviated by the seasonal overgrowth of long grasses created by Maya. Such a person identifies himself with illusory productions of nature and succumbs to illusion, forgetting his spiritual life. Now there's tapasvis that go way over there and it's kind of extreme. And there's materialists that go way over there and completely lost to spiritual practice. So tapasya alone, many, many places in the scriptures, Bhagavatam in particular, but by austerity alone, you can't reach transcendence. So it's not just by curtailing the senses, it's rather properly directing the senses to the service of the master of the senses. A road covered with grasses after rainy season is like a brahmana who is not carefully studying scriptures. Well, if someone's not carefully studying scriptures, then they're not a brahmana, or one who is carefully studying scriptures. By that practice, one gradually acquires mode of goodness characteristics or Brahminical characteristics. Therefore, it's such emphasis on carefully studying Prabhupada's books at every stage of life, whether of young age or intermediate age or senior age or whatever the age. It's not age specific, it's principle specific. Best, according to Prahlad, is from the tender age of childhood, the Komara age. Komara acharat pragyo. You know the verse? Dharman Bhagavataniha. The human form of life, manusham, is very rare to achieve, but if when used properly, it can bring perfection. And that's what Prabhupada wanted with the Hare Krishna movement. People from all different backgrounds, regardless of their birth, their education, their occupation, their socio-economic position, regardless of anything, chant and hear the scriptures and gradually awaken the dormant Krishna consciousness and Brahminical quality. It's on that basis that the Pancharatrika system that's not based upon birth, it's based upon the character and quality of someone that's awakened by spiritual practice. Remember his audience. It's this group of people. It never happened, but the event happened. A group of people in Tokyo who want to gather together and see a lifting of the human spirit. So he's giving tools for them and principles for them to be impressed with. And Prabhupada is relentless. I've been listening lately to a lecture series that Prabhupada gave in Vrindavan. Means not lecture series, morning class in Vrindavan, Canto 1, Chapter 7, describing the whole situation with Ashvatthama killing the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi. And saying, although he was born in a Brahmana family, his father was a great Brahmana, he instead took up the occupation of a Kshatriya. And not only the occupation of a Kshatriya, but diabolical activity that a Kshatriya would never do. He killed 5 boys when they were asleep. That's not what Kshatriyas do. So, in the course of this series of lectures, while still in Vrindavan, there was a room conversation. And the room conversation was with a physician who worked with the UN. And Prabhupada had some casual conversation with the man about his, how well does he feel the UN is doing, and where was he based, Geneva or New York? And he said, I moved between both places. Prabhupada said, I also visited the place. And it's just small talk. And then Prabhupada asked, how do you feel the UN is doing with its mission? And every time the man said 2 sentences, Prabhupada was on his case. The man was arguing, instead of war, let them talk. And then because they're not fighting, they're talking. That's better than fighting. Dialogue is better than war, was his idea. And Prabhupada was jumping on his case, saying, and then after the conversation, there's no resolution because they really don't know what the position of peace is. The man kept going back to, well, that's better than war, better than fighting. They're engaging in dialogue. The dialogue towards what end? There's no end to that dialogue. There's no conclusion, and then when there's no conclusion, they'll be back at war again. It doesn't resolve the problem. The resolution of the problem is already given. And until people take that resolution that's already given, Krishna's given the resolution. Bhoktaram jagatapasam, last verse of chapter 5, Bhagavad Gita. Gyatva mam shantim richati. The platform of Shanti is there. But they don't recognize who is the Bhokta of all of creation. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. They're still thinking this is my land, and they're thinking this is my land. And they're fighting over whose land it is. So there's going to be war, because they're not accepting what the reality is. And the man tried to make his point, saying the same point. Yes, Swamiji, what you say is true, but, and Prabhupada wouldn't let him wiggle. He was being very firm. So that's this. When those who are persons with Brahminical capacity, like this man, intellectual man, he knows what Bhagavad Gita says. He wasn't faithless, but he didn't have sufficient faith to put his foot down and say, like Prabhupada was doing. And therefore Prabhupada is the sadhu, and the sadhus are needed to help people who waffle understand reality and illusion and move towards reality and not be whitewashed with illusion. And that, well, this illusion is better than that illusion. Wet stool is better than dry stool. No, dry stool is better than wet stool. And have an argument over which stool is better, the wet stool or the dry stool. The fact is, there's no solution without accepting Krishna's shelter. That's a very strong message, again and again and again, that our founder Acharya would press. Now, he knew who to press and who not to press and how to press. With this audience, it's that he's addressing for Japan, it's very gentle. However, I can only imagine if he had conversation, if he went to that event and was sitting in a room with some people that wanted to hear from him further, he'd ramp up a bit. The heat would go up, and he'd press the point stronger. And sometimes pressing points strongly is needed to help people get dislodged from complacency. And he knew when to do that and when not to do that, depending upon the audience, the person. But relentless. For decades, he was doing like this. And it was very effective. So here's chapter 14, just 2 more chapters. A peaceful Krishna conscious family. Here we go, sociology. The lightning becomes unsteady in its friendship, failing to remain faithfully in any one of the clouds, although they are the friends of the entire world. Just as lusty women do not remain steady even in the company of men who possess excellent qualities. Interesting, huh? During the rainy season, lightning appears in one group of clouds and then immediately in another group of clouds. It's a nice painting. Similarly, lusty women do not remain steady even in the company of men who possess excellent qualities. Again, this prostitute in Haridas Thakur. A cloud is compared to a qualified person because it pours rain and gives sustenance to many people. A man who is qualified similarly gives sustenance to many living creatures, such as family members or many workers in business. However, when the husband is disturbed, the whole family is ruined, the children are dispersed, the business is closed, and everything is affected. Husband and wife should control sex indulgence and concentrate their mind in Krishna consciousness and should not be restless like the lightning. Now, he's going to Japan, and he's addressing an audience he's never met before. And, he's not hammering, but there it is right in this Light of the Bhagavad book. Because it's an important principle for what their elevation of the human spirit. If there isn't control of the senses, it's not like you don't talk about it. You talk about it because otherwise it's disruptive. There's happy family life in a nice painting. So that's chapter 14, and we have just one more chapter. transcendental nature of the Lord and his devotees. This is a nice chapter and a nice painting that goes with it. A rainbow in the cloudy sky, likened to the appearance of Krishna and his servants in the material world. So same painting. In the midst of the thunder, in the cloudy sky, there appears a rainbow that has no string. Its appearance is compared to the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his servants in the midst of the material atmosphere. So that's the rainbow that has no string. Krishna or Krishna's devotee appearing in the midst of the material atmosphere. So here's some Chinese characters. I don't know exactly what they're saying, but the devotees in China told me what they're saying. It's a saying in Chinese to be ever satisfied. So how are you going to be ever satisfied when you're in the midst of something that's limited and temporary and insubstantial? Insubstantial in the sense of it's not sat, it's asat. So how can one remain constant and ever fulfilled in that atmosphere? There has to be some shelter. And when there is such shelter, that's the shelter in Krishna or Krishna's devotee. That's this symbol in the verse of the rainbow. A rainbow appears to have no guna or strings, like a bow. Did you find out a place to get bows for your violin that are synthetic? You found? Oh, very good. You became happy instead of sad. She had an existential crisis about how the bow string on her violin is not made from nice things. So a rainbow in the metaphorical language, poetic language, a bow in the sky without a string. So that's Krishna or Krishna's devotee that are not connected to any of the modes of nature. Krishna is not connected to the modes of nature. The modes of nature are not connected to Krishna. He oversees them, but he's not influenced by them. And having Krishna's association or Krishna's devotee association is likened in that way, like a rainbow in the sky. When Krishna appears before us in the midst of material interactions, he remains always unaffected, like a stringless bow, stringless rainbow. Somebody sent something to me just today. I want to share it with you. It's from Brahma Samhita. Maybe I left it in the car. See if I left it in the car. It's those verses at the end, Shriya Kanta Kanta Purusha Kalpataravo Druma Bhumis Chintamani Ganamayi Tayam Amritam. Oh, I know where I can find it. I'm going to do this for just a second. Oh, that's it. Well, here's what it's from Brahma Samhita 542. Listen, same message, Lord Brahma speaking. Those who constantly recollect, meditate upon, in accordance with spiritual instruction, the name, figure, or form attributes and pastimes of the form of Krishna appearing in the amorous rasa, whose loveliness vanquishes the god of mundane love. He's Madan Mohan. He's the attractor of Cupid. Conqueror of all mundane hearts, that's Krishna, or mundane hearts are conquered by Cupid, and Krishna is the conqueror of Cupid. Such persons are alone meditators of Krishna. Krishna, who is full of pastimes, always manifests himself with his realm only in the pure receptive cognition of such persons. Clear? I mean, the language is Bhaktisiddhanta's language. It's not sweet and poetic, but it's very explicit. Krishna appears in the hearts of those who meditate upon him in these ways. Along with his transcendental realm. Let's go this way. There we go. The pastimes of that manifested divine realm triumphantly dominates in every way all the majesty and beauty of the mundane world. So the mundane world has its glory. And the glory of this mundane world is completely defeated by the glory of the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm manifests in the hearts of those who engage in hearing, chanting, and remembering the personality of Godhead, who has all these nice characteristics that are being described. So now let's go back to Light of the Bhagavad. When Krishna appears before us in the midst of material interactions, he remains always unaffected, like a stringless rainbow. Oh, I remember, it was Vibhu Chaitanya that was responding about the Akbar in history. Although he was from a different background, he was a Vaishnav. He didn't abandon, he just was a Vaishnav. He didn't abandon his tradition. But he was a Vaishnav with great, great, great appreciation and moods of service for the great elevated devotees. So Krishna showed himself to Akbar. And when Krishna shows himself to someone who is very devoted, he's likened here in this nice verse to a rainbow in the sky that has no connection with the modes of nature. Very poetic. Krishna is unaffected by material interactions. He can appear and disappear like a rainbow. Similarly, his devotees, appearance of Krishna and his servants, they're also free from the qualities of material nature. Now this is a nice painting of Srila Prabhupada somewhere, maybe in Tompkins Square Park, maybe in the Golden Gate Park, somewhere where he's surrounded by young people who are uncultured and probably unclean and probably unintelligent, but he's has cartels and he's chanting with great faith that this is the method of taking the surroundings here and lifting it into transcendence. And sure enough, that's what happened. Now, the chanting was without offense, and the chanting was with transcendental faith, and that chanting with no offense and transcendental faith has fullness of potency, fullness of power. It has transforming capacity. And that's what our founder Acharya was doing with this plan. Very clearly, from the earlier verses, it's very clear. His plan was to uplift the intelligent, high-thinking, well socially positioned people to take very clear notice of the Vedic model, the Bhagavata's model of devotion to the personality of Godhead very seriously, behind all of the movements of nature, and be agents to uplift the rest of society. That was his plan. And if you saw the first presentation, what was the setting when Prabhupada was doing all of this? A little tiny room in an obscure place in Vrindavan, Vangsi Gopal Temple. No one even heard of that place. A room 17 feet by 9 feet. This was stark walls and nothing. And he had no money. He had no resource. He had no followers. He had no helpers. He had no typewriter. He had nothing. But he had everything. He had capacity to write and empowerment from his spiritual master. And it didn't work out, and he wasn't discouraged. He just kept going and kept going. Obstacle after obstacle, he kept going. No results, he kept going. With a vision. And growing the vision and putting the vision out, and elegantly and masterfully, and it attracted many people over the course of time. Okay, so that's it for today's session. See if there's some discussion. The presentation is a little different than regular Bhagavatam class. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, I have two questions. One is related to today's presentation. Twice, when the rainbow was being referred, it was stringless rainbow. So I just want to know if there is a significance to mentioning that particular characteristic. How is stringless important?
Yeah. String, replace the word string with rope or guna or modes of nature. That's the significance. No modes of nature connected to the personality of Godhead or his pure devotees. A stringless bow. It's poetic, but that's the significance of the connection, the stringless bow.
Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, that makes sense now. So, thank you. The second question was, I think yesterday, when we were talking about lightning, we compared it with Sattva Gun. And today, when we were looking at the example of lightning, it was not in a very positive sense. So, maybe it's just different scenario, but the same example has been taken because in reference we are taking lightning and thunder and rains. That's why maybe. But I just want to be clear that I'm not missing anything on these two differences.
We discussed this yesterday. This is poetic. And with poetry, there are symbols. And symbols may indicate this. In another circumstance, they may indicate that. And they're not clashing between this and that. It's just the context is different and the symbolism is used in a different way. That's all.
Thank you, Maharaj.
A poet can use words in different ways, and it's quite okay, even in the same composition.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, you have discussed like the devotees will not be disturbed, like pure devotees will not be disturbed in the big misfortune, like Maharaj. Like, what will be the advice for us, like to apply the same thing for us, like
Each of us are given some tribulation. I don't think there's any exception. Each of us are given some tribulation. And Krishna's arrangement for, the scale of tribulation is something that we can handle. For example, we could not handle what Prahlad Maharaj had to endure, and he endured. We could not handle what Haridas Thakur had to endure. But Krishna, so according to our capacity, Krishna may dial up the tribulation scale. That doesn't have to. Doesn't mean as you become more advanced, for sure and certain, your tribulations are going to escalate. Doesn't mean that. But back to your question, how do we apply this to ourselves? We're in Krishna's hands, and Krishna by nature is kind, just like a parent, a loving parent, and a dependent child. They're affectionate to their dependent child. And depending upon the child, the affectionate parent is going to reciprocate this way, that way, or another way. And so Krishna is like the affectionate parent. What does the affectionate parent want? Affectionate parent wants good character and good conduct and affection. That's what good parents want. She'll need a chair. You want a chair, or you want to sit on the floor? Chair would be nice. Well, there's some chairs behind you. Let's take 2 minutes and move one of those chairs so she has a chair. Look at that. That's okay. It's okay. Senior citizens get special treatment. It's just saying you're an old lady, that's all. You don't have to hold your ears.
Sorry, one temple, that's my responsibility. Yesterday, ISKCON temple has the responsibility, so that's why I came late today.
Okay. So I forget where we were. Have you had your question responded to?
Yes.
Where tribulations come commensurate with our capacity. Or say it negatively, Krishna will not put us through some difficulty that we cannot endure. He'll give us the strength to endure. There's a very nice saying or statement by Prabhupada in the Bali Maharaj narration, where he was put into such a severe situation. Prabhupada comments, an ordinary person would not be able to survive, but he was able to survive because Krishna gave him the strength to survive, and not only to survive but respond. He got 5 gold stars under his report card because he responded in such a transcendental way. Although there were persons thinking, this is unfair, this is unkind. Why is this dwarf Brahmin doing like this? They were criticizing Vamana instead of, appreciating, just see how kind he is to him. So anyway, Prabhupada's comment was that when tribulations come, the Lord knows what our capacity is, and He'll give us the strength to deal with that tribulation. So He knows us, like a loving parent knows their child. And they don't, break the child. There may be a little test of their resilience, because in life you need to be a little resilient. So, like that. That's how it applies to us.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Anything else? I'm expecting a question from your daughter. So get ready for a question after you're dead. Go ahead.
Maharaj, many times we hear one should fix in spiritual knowledge
Yes.
or fixed in the lotus feet of the spiritual master.
Yeah.
So, in a actionable way, how should I understand it?
The adjective, being fixed, you can use other words that mean something quite similar, but where a nice explanation is in Bhagavad Gita 2:41. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Ekeha kurunandana. So even when something comes and shakes one, something that's fixed, it doesn't let go, because it's fixed. Doesn't let go. Even when there's cause, it doesn't become, floating in the sky, or with no shelter. Fixed means it's not movable. Ekeha. And that comes, it's imparted by Supersoul as spiritual intelligence. So this is back to the question, fixed in knowledge. It's not conceptual or theoretical knowledge. It's where Supersoul is keeping one connected, fixed. So that the root of being fixed is being fixed in one's relationship with the personality of God, which no one can take away. Circumstance can't take away. It can't create, nor can it take it away. That means it's sat, or it's spiritual, not materially created or materially destroyed. Ahaitoki pratyata. That's fixed. Then it's fully on the spiritual platform. And it's resting on that which is eternal. Our relationship with Krishna is eternal. That's fixed.
Thank you, Maharaj. So, in other words, can I also think that the spiritual knowledge is meant for the application, and in those situations, one is applying it?
Well, when you say meant for the application, that's a process, and processes are often intermittent, meaning sometimes not, sometimes not. So yes, knowledge is meant to be applied, but knowledge isn't always applied, even when knowledge it should be applied.
Okay. I have one other question, Maharaj. In one of the slides, I was seeing the example of mountains and rains, and in that one of the statement was one who has dedicated in the transcendental loving service. He will not be disturbed in the middle of any circumstances.
Yes, like a mountain when struck by torrents of rain doesn't move.
Yes, Maharaj. So, as a sadhaka, if one is agitated, or means he is still thinking that he has taken the process of dedication towards Krishna strongly, but still he is getting disturbed. What does that mean?
That just means it's not mature. Same as with that one of those earlier verses. One who's not mature is not fixed in knowledge. Same fixed in knowledge, they're not fixed in knowledge, and so they can be disturbed when there's a cause for disturbance. And when there's a cause for disturbance, they can behave or speak in ways that are inappropriate for a sadhu. It's just immaturity as opposed to maturity. When there's maturity, then it's like the mountain that doesn't get shaken when torrents of rain come. Or a sadhu is fixed in knowledge, as opposed to just have knowledge and sometimes not. Is that right?
Yes, Maharaj. And one other point, the allurements like wind and storm,
Yeah,
and for a household person,
there's
he should
lots
not
of
be
that.
disturbed by the indulgence in the sex, and many other things.
Yes,
What we are
yes,
hearing.
objects, temporary and pleasures. So there's allurement, but it's not only the householder has allurement. Any embodied entity there's allurement. Take this example. Giriraj Maharaj at the time was not a sannyasi; he was a brahmachari, and so whether it was a householder having a prostitute sitting next to him, or brahmachari with a prostitute sitting next to him, doing her thing, agitating the mind of a man, where's the protection? Where's the shelter? And so we heard the answer to that.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Are you ready? You have a question ready? Yes? Okay, give her the microphone.
So in this slide, Hare Krishna, Raj.
Hare Krishna.
So in the slideshow, what does it mean by string, but in rainbow string? What does it mean? I don't know.
It sounds like his question. With the Sanskrit word guna, the three gunas. You know what the three gunas are, right? Goodness, passion, ignorance. Modes of nature, three modes of nature. So one of the Sanskrit word is guna. And there's different meanings for the word guna, but one of the meanings is rope. You've heard that before? Rope? So just like sometimes to make rope very strong, they wind one rope together with another rope together with another rope, and it's like triple rope. That's a rope, but it has three strands. It makes it really, really, really strong. The three modes of nature are guna, or rope, or lighter than that is string. So it's a metaphor or a comparison with a bow that has no string. So similarly, the rainbow is like a bow that has no string. The rainbow is the personality of Godhead appearing, but there's no modes of nature connected to him. That's just, it's poetic expression. It's like a bow that has no string. Now, bows have string, otherwise they wouldn't bend. But Krishna bends like a rainbow, but there's no string, there's no modes of nature connected with him. It's poetry, but that's the meaning. Okay?
Hare Krishna,
Hare
thank you,
Krishna.
Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So we heard that when we focus on transcendence, we can endure the disturbing situations very easily. So my question is, what is the internal disposition of an undisturbed person? Is that like even if external manifestations of disturbance could still be there, but internally he is undisturbed. So wanted little clarity on that, Maharaj. What is
Well,
this?
it's his question. What does fixed mean? You're asking the same question he asked with different language.
So my main,
Fixed means undisturbed.
right.
Not fixed is chanchala, easily disturbed.
Right.
Here comes something and there it goes. And here comes another something and there it goes. But then where the mind is not, remains undisturbed or fixed, even when there's cause, even when there's wind or something or something or something, the mind is focused. So how do you get a mind that's focused? By purity, it takes gradually reducing the influence of the modes of nature, the impact. The modes are out there, acting, but if we're not identifying with them in the mood of being an enjoyer of them, then we're meditating on something else. The mind is absorbed in the rainbow without a string. The mind is absorbed in the personality of Godhead who has no influence of the modes of nature. And that's how we can go beyond the modes of nature and not otherwise. That's yoga, linking with the Supreme. And when that linking is matured, then it's fixed.
Yes.
And then even something comes along that's agitating, one remains unagitated. Because that was one of the expressions earlier. Although during the rainy season so much water is flowing into the ocean doesn't move. It doesn't rise or doesn't fall. The tide comes and goes, but it's not because of river water. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Okay.
But at certain level where we are like sadhakas, so at certain level, I mean, external manifestations still could be there, but internally we might be trying to take shelter of Krishna. So at our level,
Well, we're supposed to.
yeah.
And as we become mature, there's the immature and mature. That was discussed earlier.
Yeah.
You know, the mystic yogi that's not mature may be agitated by objects, and their meditation is interrupted.
Yeah.
And our devotion to Krishna may be interrupted because we're immature, or not fixed, or not properly absorbed in the mood of serving Krishna. And when that slackens a little bit, in comes Maya.
Right.
Not after some time, immediately Maya comes. As soon as the submission is slackened.
So when there is a transcendental personality, Guru Maharaj, and here is immature sadhaka, like in Prabhupada's memories, some devotees were remembering that when one devotee fell sick, one devotee's daughter fell sick, and that lady was crying and asking Prabhupada, what should I do? And Prabhupada was very firm and stern that I am teaching this to you for all the time, that you will expect this and this is temporary. So maybe she is looking for some like soft words or something. So here is a little bit like imbalance in understanding. And so how to like navigate through this realm where a transcendental personality is there and here we are immature, but he's giving his association his causeless mercy, but we still want to understand him, but we are not able to sometimes. So how to navigate
This
this?
question is kind of like fireworks. It's all over the place. Now, Prabhupada, being a transcendental personality, wasn't moved by the modes of nature.
Right.
So when he would speak softly and gently, or when he would speak directly, or he would speak very strongly, he was inspired by Supersoul for the benefit and resting upon the relationship with the person. And he knew what the right medicine at the right time, in the right manner. And he was an expert physician that had good bedside manner. He knew how to hold hands with people and have them feel comforted. And he also knew how to be very strong.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly when, because he was guided by Supersoul. No, we're not guided by Supersoul like he was guided by Supersoul. But your question was how to navigate. And it's just understanding his transcendental position. A loving father, transcendental loving father, may sometimes be very strong.
Yeah.
And then why would he be very strong? Anytime. Because it was good for the devotee.
Yes.
And he would know when and when not to.
Yeah. Yes. That explains.
Sometimes very soft.
Yeah.
Sometimes very firm. I heard a nice story from Hari Sori about this particular point. One of Hari Sori's services was bringing Prabhupada's prasadam. And one of his Hari Sori's services was he would massage Prabhupada up to a certain particular point in time, and then Prabhupada would go take a bath, apply tilak, fresh dhoti, sit down, chant Gayatri, and then immediately hot prasadam was supposed to be brought. And one of the things that Prabhupada required with the chapatis was the chapatis would puff. And then he would poke his finger in the puffed chapati, and the hot air would come. And he'd break off a part of the hot chapati, take some sabji. And one time, the chapati was late. So Prabhupada expressed, not that he was a sense gratifier, but for whatever the reason, transcendental reason, he became angry. Where's the chapati? And Palika came out and said that wouldn't puff up, Prabhupada. And he said, I forget exactly what happened, but he spoke in such a way that Palika started to cry and ran out of the room. And Prabhupada turned to Hari Sori and said, she's the only woman I can speak like that to. The other women I never speak like that, but Palika can take it. So now why did he do it to anybody? Because, the understanding was it would help them strengthen their mood of service to do the service very nicely. Not like he was, unless it's a hot chapati with puffed up, then I can't digest the food, or I'll become sick, or you're not a good devotee, or something like that. It was that, it strengthened the relationship, but he knew when to and when not to.
That's very wonderful explanation. It's very helpful.
And he moved seamlessly, like a river flowing, would move around the rocks and around the this and that and the waterfalls and this and that and keep flowing. And he, so many different people in so many different circumstances. And he knew exactly how to speak to them. And sometimes very soft, sometimes very comforting, sometimes repeat, sometimes become angry, sometimes scold, sometimes and sometimes, according to the relationship and what the devotee needed to be picked up.
Yes. Yeah.
Fully conscious. Krishna's empowered representative. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, we have something over here.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have two questions. Both are very small. Like Radha Rani got married with Abhimanyu. Who was that Abhimanyu? Is that Mahabharata Abhimanyu or?
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay, Guru Maharaj. And one more.
I'm listening.
Okay. One more question, Guru Maharaj. In first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter I don't remember, but there is a process, not process, the way how we take darshan of Krishna and Radharani from feet to like up like that, then come to face. So can you explain how should our mood and how should we go properly?
You know what she's asking? She's your wife. You should. You know what she's asking. Give him the microphone.
Hey Krishna Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, she is asking that when we look at the deities, we look at from the lotus feet and then legs, navel and all, right? So what should be our mood actually, like when we take the darshan of a Lord?
Prayerful mood, service mood, appreciation mood, reverential mood, inspired to wish to serve, appreciate the nice service of the pujaris who dressed and ornamented the deity very nicely. So different moods. You know, the essence of it is service, that which will nourish our desire to be engaged further in service. Learn from those devotees that have done very nice service in dressing and decorating the deity, how they did it very nicely. Learn from them so we can please our deity nicely or the temple deity nicely or something like that. Okay?
Yes, Guru
Is that your
Maharaj.
question? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.